So let's think about how climate change plays into food security. Well, climate change is a very complex process. It's not just warmer air, right? It's warmer air plus more carbon dioxide, plus often more extreme droughts, more extreme rains, perhaps more humidity, different insects, different diseases, right? All of this goes into how climate change impacts our agriculture and food systems. So the effects of climate change on crop and terrestrial food production are evident in several regions around the world. We have high confidence in this. And if you look at any single crop, often you'll find both some places that are positively impacted by climate change and other places that are negatively impacted by climate change. And this image does a really good job at showing that general spread. So the x-axis is the yield impact of climate. So some percent change per decade. Anything positive means that climate change is actually helping that crop. Anything negative means that climate change is hindering that crop. And you can see that some crops like soy aren't hugely affected, right? The median, the average is actually right on zero, with about half of the regions being positively impacted, half being negatively impacted. However, when you look at other crops, the majority of crops like maize, rice, wheat, other staples, the negative impacts of climate trends are more common than the positive ones. Right? And we can see this not just for individual crops, but also through time as we have these sporadic climate impacts. So periods of rapid price increase for food and cereal, have followed climate extremes. So anytime, or because as a world, we often rely on specific areas for a type of food. So for example, in the US, we grow a lot of wheat, right? We also grow a lot of corn. Anytime there's a major drought here, well, then the price of corn and wheat might spike globally. And you can actually see this in this figure where it's showing over time the price index for lots of different foods. And you can see that right before every single drop was some sort of climate extreme, right? Where one crop in one location failed because of some sort of climate extreme. For example, drought devastates U.S. maize and soy crops in 2012, and we can see that, the spike in the price of corn and maize at that time. Likewise, here's an example from Russia. Vladimir Putin bans grain exports as drought and wildfires ravage crops. And we can see that, right, at that time, there's that huge spike in prices as there is a fall in the production of these foods. So because there's this, a single climate event in one location can have global impacts on the accessibility and price of food, we have to think about, well, where does our food come from, right? Are we importing it? Are we growing it here? What climate extremes is it susceptible to? So our overall food supply, right? How much of our food do you think is imported? It might surprise you. It kind of surprised me. It was actually a little low from what I expected. We only import about 15% of our food, right? We grow most of it here. But that isn't to say that all of our food is mostly grown here. Instead, it's different types of food gotten different places. So rice, we grow most of our own rice. We only import about 11%. Seafood, however, we import almost all of it. We import 94% of our seafood. Fresh vegetables, about 1/3 are imported, and fresh fruit, over half are imported, right? So this means that, right, given these global extremes like droughts and wildfire in Russia or hurricanes in the tropics, right, that can impact what food we have access to, where we might have to shift our own diets, right? Maybe that we have plenty of rice. That's always a staple. We can always fall back on rice, but it does mean that sometimes we might not have access to affordable seafood.